Take two. There we go. I think we have volume now. Take two of the big show. Sorry about the mistake earlier. I thought, something's wrong. I checked everything in the whole studio, like microphone working, software is all working. What's going on? It turns out that I had my microphone not muted, but the input level set to 0 on my app. I rebooted my computer and everything else. So whoopsie. Sorry about that, everybody. But we're back, and let's get into it here. So what I was saying was we had the day off yesterday. I went to Seattle. So I was over in Seattle getting my car fixed. I brag about my town. I love Wenatchee so much, right? My mom is here now. She's moved here from Florida. She's here for probably a couple of months while my brother gets healed up. My brother had a bad accident a couple weeks ago. Anyway, she's like, where's all the rain? I thought Washington rained all the time. Like, no, Washington doesn't rain all the time. Seattle rains all the time. So I left here yesterday morning. It was 90 when I left my house at 7 o'clock in the morning and sunny. I literally crossed the mountain into Seattle, 65 in rain, and all the traffic you can handle. Like, it was brutal how much traffic there was yesterday. So I'm like, man, I don't miss this at all over here. But it was a good day. I got to hang out with Ian all day long. After I got my car fixed, I got some dinner. And I went over to Ian Olson's house, and Ian Double Deuce, you know him from chat. We just hung out and talked. We were going to go play last night, but we ended up just sitting there in his house talking and catching up, and it was super cool. It was super cool. Lou says, I got to change the name. When you see the Degen, you expect Chris. I know, it's a weird name. I got to think of a better name for the show. The Daily Degen's cool, but I do need something different. I think you're right about that. I think Chris said I could use the name because it's a cool name, but we got to change it. I'll put a poll out next week with some ideas for new show names. And I guess while we're talking about next week, it'll be a short week again. I'm going to be Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, not Friday. Thursday, we go and leave for our cruise. We'll be gone for a week. So after next Friday, we're gone for a full week. We're going to be cruising Alaska, come back, and I'll have some of that. So did not get to Central Oregon. No, we came back. We flew back. So I flew to Florida. I actually flew to Atlanta, then Florida, then drove from Florida to New Jersey, and then flew from New Jersey back to Seattle. That was the trip that we took. My mom, we had to take her car to my brother's house, basically. So I flew to Florida, packed her car, drove her and her stuff to Joey's house, unpacked her there, and then we flew back out here. She's going to be here till about mid to late August, so we'll see. Anyway, all that to say, sorry for yesterday being not here, and let's get on with today's show. And again, I got to remind you, I'm actually gonna. I keep saying I'm gonna turn this part into a little canned video, but reminder, right? When you watch me, when you watch anybody, please filter what you hear and what you see on all these shows, right? Through the lens of your own goals, how your bankroll supports you, what your bankroll is capable of, what strategies you like to play, the ways you want to win, hopefully, and understand and embrace your own relationship with risk, right? Which leads you into identifying when it's time to stay, go, lean in, and keep your emotions in check, right? The emotional check thing is an important one for me. It's like you should never get so bad, so into a role or whatever, right? That or a hand or whatever, that it changes your life. Somebody once said to us, I forget who it was, maybe it was Dr. S actually, who's here in chat, that or maybe it was Lou, I forget, no win should be life-changing in size, nor should any loss. Like, no win or loss should change your life, right? Unless you catch the 107 roller in Atlantic City and you make $100,000 on one shooter. That's a life-changing event. But by and large, your average days shouldn't matter that much to you. Thank you, Dr. S. Vince. Your average day at the craps table should not, or your average weekend in Vegas should not be a life-changing week monetarily. That's an important thing. And that emotional IQ thing, I think, is so important. So anyway, here we go. DiceCon, I think, is wrapping up right now. Next up is us, Craps for the Cure, the 13th and 14th at Casino Quest and Palace Station. If you're going to be there on Friday, it's my birthday. So we'll probably do some pole dancing in a luxury limousine or some shit on Friday. We'll have a good time on Friday. And then the 2 days of the event for sure. And we'll talk about the event more and more as we get closer to it. But I've kind of dialed in on how we're going to do the fundraising this year. Very different than before. We're going to still have a couple of big items, but we're not going to do these big raffles like we used to do. What was successful last year, honestly, was, Bo Parker said anybody who donates $1,000 gets a free day of lesson with me. Right? It was great because it was easy. It wasn't like you're bidding to play with Bo. It was you're donating, and as a leveled up donator, you get to hang out with Bo for a day, right? So we're doing that again. But I'm also working with casinos to say, hey, look, if you donate, everybody who donates $500 gets a weekend experience, suite, meals, free play at a casino, right? So those kind of things. So to encourage the bigger donations, we'll do that kind of stuff, right? Everything else that we do is going to be small and it's going to be tactical. We're going to do, $65 donations, buy a bag of dog food. Every $90 donation buys a doctor visit. Like that, we're going to actually like itemize what it takes to raise one of these service dogs. And that's going to be the thing this year. So it'll be very easy for us to talk through it during the shows and that kind of thing. Anyway, that's happening there. Then right after that, Big AZ's in town in Vegas. And then right after that's Casino Tiers. So I will probably go to Vegas on like September 11th or something like that. Maybe not the 11th, maybe the 10th. And I'll just stay there through October 5th. I'll just stay there for like 2 weeks or 2.5 weeks and just do my event, Big AZ's event. I'm going to be there for the Casino Tiers event, and then I'm going to run home after that. So and I'll work from there too. So that's what's happening in our world. Now, one thing we got to talk about, I think, is this whole couple of reviews I want to do. I finally got a chance to really listen deep to the Roll to Win Tales from the Table that he did with Michael Feldman. It was, and I also listened to the Gargoyle show with Jeff. So if you've got any thoughts or any questions about either of those shows, you know what to do, right? It's Q:question in the chat, like I'm showing you here. I'm giving a little demo, right? Do that for me, and we can address what I'm talking about. So I'm not going to do a typical reaction video where I kind of show the video and make fun of different parts. I want to just kind of do like my thoughts after having watched it. And I think Ed, by the way, I hope he's listening or maybe watching this later. Ed's getting really, really good at interviewing. And I think that he's spending a lot of quality time with 10 Ton. 10 Ton, as you know, if you don't know 10 Ton, if you haven't met him in person, I have. Great guy. Like I said, he and I are like brothers that didn't know each other for years, right? He's all about quality, right? He bought Ed and Bo Parker microphones. He bought, he's making sure that the quality of the audio is great, blah, blah. Ed has taken that on. When he does his own shows now, like the Michael Feldman show, audio is great. Everything sounded really, really good. The production quality is getting better. I mean, I think he's using some AI tools to help him with the transition. It looks awesome. Like the quality of that versus the quality of his first couple Tales to the Table, it's night and day, right? I think we can all agree on that. Additionally, I think because he's spending so much time, with 10 Ton and they're interviewing, Ed's interview skills have gotten so much better. One of the things that the Justice Jen and I talk about all the time is my interview skills. We said, when you have people on, John, she's like saying that you're getting better at interviewing by giving your guest space to talk, gentle prompts here and there, a little bit of discussion here and there, but by and large, you're interviewing somebody because you want to hear them, not you. And Ed does a really good job of getting out of the way and letting Michael in this one talk, which is fantastic because Michael's got a lot to say. I know Michael very well. I played with him, hung out with him. I work for him as I'm part of the Premier team. I'm one of those sub reps he was talking about in the show. So I know Michael very well, and he's got great stories to tell. And Ed allowed the stories to kind of emerge, which was really cool. Ed, I felt like this one didn't do a whole lot of interviewing, right? It was more like, and even though Ed doesn't know Michael that well, it was more like two dudes just talking. At like that would be a conversation you would have heard recorded over lunch, the way that they kind of interplayed, which made it really good. I tell you all the time, one of my favorite podcasts, of course, is Joe Rogan. I love Joe Rogan, right? Not because of his beliefs or anything. I mean, whatever. It's his way of interviewing. He's got this really cool way of, even when he knows the answer, he asks the question in a way that you think he doesn't know the answer. And his reactions to the answers are always supernatural. Like, not supernatural, but very natural, right? Which makes that show engaging because he plays the role of everyman, right? I think Ed is doing that with these interviews, and he's doing it not like every man. He's interviewing or talking to Feldman and now others as they do these other interviews, like he knows the guy and they're just chumming it up, right? That makes that show hour and 50 minutes went by like that for me. It was great. It was a really good show. So I really enjoyed that. Now, a couple of highlights from it for me. One, and I think you probably know, like the big highlight, not so much the tales of the big roles and all that kind of stuff. Ed pinned him down a couple of times. What really happened with you and Dom, right? And Feldman went deep into like the story, why he and Dom parted company, right? And it's what I've heard before, right? And, you know, I've had this conversation with other people, like Dom and Jerry Patterson had a falling out. Dom and Frank Sclebetti had a falling out. Dom and Michael Feldman had a falling out. Dom and Howard had a falling out. Dom and Bo Parker had a falling out, right? If maybe the problem is you, Dom, like that could be a thing, right? I mean, I've heard before, you know, that Dom has this he's very abrasive, right? He's like your best friend until you say one little thing and then he goes off on you. And Feldman told that story of Dom just going off on him in front of a whole student body. Things are never the same. And in the end, when Dom tried to screw him out of all the money, and Dom claimed that Feldman screwed him, Dom was screwing Michael out of the money on that. If you listen to the podcast, you'll know what part I'm talking about. That speaks volumes to me about a lot of things. Okay. Now I'm going to get really personal here and because I can, I have talked to Dom. I don't like him. I didn't like my conversation with him. I thought he was kind of like, whatever, very cocky. He came up to me as in this realm, right? Here's a guy. And this is going to feed into, by the way, the anti-DI crowd. They're going to love this, right? Here's a guy that claims to be the greatest shooter on the planet. Sniping numbers, right? The Discovery Show channel about him, right? He owns a software company. Ostensibly very successful software company, right? He's the greatest shooter of all time, yet he's sweating commission money from Feldman, right? He runs a school. Some of the students go with Michael as clients. He wants back commission for 9 years or whatever it was, right? Bullshit to me. If you're that good of a shooter, you're that great of a craps player, you're that great of a businessman, you don't sweat that money. In fact, what you do as a good business person is if one of your subordinates, Michael was an instructor for DTC, if one of your subordinates is having success, you celebrate the success. You don't try and share it. You don't try and make that person share with you. That to me is bullshit, and it speaks to Dom's quality as a human being. To me, I look at that and I go, that tells me all I need to know. But sometimes they say, when somebody shows you who they are, believe them. Dom showed Feldman who he was a couple of times. Dom has showed everybody who he was a couple of times. Believe him. Okay, that was a takeaway for me. And as I listened to that story, I just got pissed. Right? Ed did ask Feldman one interesting question where he pinned him down again on another question where he pinned him down, which is great. He said, "Is the captain real?" Michael didn't hesitate and said, "What did he say?" Nope. No way the captain's real, right? And in fact, he leaned into that and he said, "Hey, he's not real." Ed suggested maybe the captain was like like in Frank Sclebetti's mind, like this amorphous of 4 different people that he created a caricature out of, right? And Feldman and Mike and agreed. He probably made the captain up as a way to tell stories because he's a storyteller as an author to sell books. Okay. So now I'll tell you this, Frank Sclebetti to me is full of shit too, right? If you're going to make up a thing, the greatest shooter I ever saw, and it's this captain that nobody's ever seen or talked to for the sole purpose of selling books, charlatan. It's the grift. It's all that shit, right? You can't believe, in my opinion right now, one fucking thing that Frank Sclebetti says. Not one thing. To me, all of his books belong in the dumpster. If the captain isn't real, everything he says in those books is bullshit. And it belongs in the fucking dumpster. That's how I feel about that. Again, if you're going to create a caricature call it a story. But don't pretend like it's some mythical person who's got to wear a mask and nobody can ever know his identity. Bullshit. If that's true, if Michael's right about that, then Frank Sclevetti can suck it too. Both of those guys, right? And again, it's the grift. It's, I'm going to make this shit up to sell a book, right? I'm going to make this shit up to sell classes and create my persona. That drives me insane. Now, again, I know that people who are, the anti-DI folks are like, yeah, right on, John. And I think I'm right about that. I think whatever those two say, you can throw it out the window as garbage, especially when it comes down to the DI stuff. Okay. Now I know Jerry Patterson was the first one to really go after the on-axis stuff, and he taught that, whatever, right? Frank tries to explain it in the book. In every book, they have all the graphs and charts and all the angles and all that bullshit, right? About how the axis toss works. And I've told you before, I don't believe a word of it. I don't believe that the on-axis toss ever stays on axis other than when it's out of your hand, right? This is a quote. I gotta pull this up. This is from Brian Baldwin, Holy Roller, said this in a group chat with us. We're talking about DI in a group chat. He says this is great. His DI is more about practicing quantum physics, but most people will think you're crazy when you try to explain it, right? I think you get people trying to explain the physics of a toss that don't understand physics and are trying to sell a book and make it sound more complicated than it is. That's Sclevetti to me. Okay. We'll get to this in a minute. There is stuff about the tossing that I think there's merit to. And we'll talk about it when I talk about the Gargoyle show. There's a lot of merit to tossing the dice and practicing, right? There is no merit to all that angle bullshit that they're teaching in these books, right? They're coming off as experts to sell you a book. And the fact that he made the captain up tells me that. It's all bullshit, especially the way those guys tell you how to bet. It's all horseshit. So anyway, Feldman, the other question that I think Ed could have asked and should have asked, and I wish he would have maybe thought of it in the moment to ask, was the obvious follow-up, right? If the captain's made up, right? If we can all agree that the common denominator in all of the fallings out with GTC is Dom. Dom is the central figure and has ripped everybody a new asshole, and they all quit. Even his best friend has quit, right? If Dom's the problem, here's the question, has Dom ever been kicked out of a casino because of his toss? Or because he's winning too much, like he claims? He claims he's been trespassed because of how great of a thrower he is. Is that true? Or is that bullshit? Or has Dom been kicked out of the casinos and exiled from the casinos because he's an asshole and he treats the dealers in the pit and the staff like shit? I can believe that after hearing Michael talk. That's more believable to me than him being such a good thrower that they won't let him in. I've heard Dom say, "Oh, I needed to get, $4,000 for my daughter's, tuition, but I went to the casino and just, I'll just go throw for 10 minutes and make $4,000. If you can do that, why are you running a software company? Why are you trying to sell books? Why are you trying to sell classes? And why are you trying to sweat a few $1,000 out of one of your teachers? Why are you trying to sweat Michael for some money? That's bullshit. I don't believe Dom a thing that guy says for a minute. Okay, now I'm going to cut all that out and make that a short, because like I said, when somebody shows you who they are, believe them. That's the takeaway there. Now, on to the next one, which is the Gargoyle show. And I'm going to go a little bit long today because I started late. The Gargoyle show with Jeff was amazing, right? Now, this one is interesting. There was a little bit of controversy in the show, which I want to get to. So you think Craps is the name of the show, and everybody's like, oh my God, but that math. The math Gargoyle put out there was crazy, right? Now, the show, in my opinion, was great. Like, I think celebrating guys like Howard is important, right? Howard is a legend, right? He's been playing forever. And like Gargoyle said, and again, to compare Howard to Dom. Both guys were at GTC. Obviously, Dom founded it. Both guys taught tossing, right? Howard, right? Hey, I like what I'm seeing in you. Why don't you come over and let's work on your toss together? Didn't ask for money, right? In the first couple of meetings, right? It just, hey, I think You're good. Let's play. I want to see what you're doing, right? That's Howard, right? Howard, let me go buy you lunch and let's talk. Howard stopped taking money. He's like, hey, dude, I don't want your money. I just want to play with you, right? That's interesting, right? That's interesting to me. Howard was a good guy. He wanted to see people better. He wasn't out there teaching you how to make $1 billion. Gargoil even said Howard's whole thing wasn't about the betting. He's like, let's just play. He just like to throw the dice. Howard to me sounds like me a little bit, where I don't really care about the money as much. I enjoy throwing. I like to play craps, and I'm not out there to make a living at it or make $1 billion. I'm out. I enjoy trying to make it happen. It's fun to me. That's the pursuit of excellence, is the joy of the game, right? I think Howard approached it that way, and I think he treated his students like that too, which is great. Anyway, there was a part in that thing where Gargoyle was trying to explain, and I think he lost Jeff, and I lost some of the people in the chat. And I want you in chat right now. I know Jeff's here. Maybe you can or can't type, but listen to what this is. Gargoyle was talking about a part of his conversations with Howard, and he was trying to explain the way Howard viewed dice combinations. And here's the split of it. And I think this is such, again, Howard was a genius in a lot of ways. And he was a musician, which means he was, he had that creative, thing in his brain anyway. So he would look at the world a little bit from an 87-degree angle instead of a 90-degree angle, which is what good, talented musicians and creative people do. Anyway, with this piece of it, he was saying, look, let's look at how different people view the game. And I'm actually going to do a whole show on this. I think it's important to do this. But let's look at how different people view the game, right? A DI, somebody who's practiced in shooting or is working on their toss, looks at the dice one way, okay? Some of us in phase one of that look at the combinations that came out. I'm setting my dice, I'm throwing the thing, and I'm looking at a 1 and a 5 or a 2 and a 4. Okay, throw them again. I got a 2 and a 9. I throw them again. I got a 5 and a whatever. So that one die is always on. I'm always getting the result in the one die. That's interesting, right? The other one's going cattywampus. But a DI is looking at the resulting combinations. And they know that there's 6 ways to make a 7. So, they're looking at what the 2 dice are doing, and they're trying to change their toss, hopefully to influence one of the dice to do a certain thing that maybe doesn't come up that way, right? That's what DI is all about. DIs care about that. DIs care about watching the flight. They care about watching the impact and seeing, do the dice impact and go straight to the wall? Do they impact and they go sideways, right? And different toss types are designed to have the dice go straight into the wall. Some toss types are designed to have the dice hit and go sideways on purpose, right? Howard knew that. And he said, and one of the things he was saying to people was, look, as a teacher of throwing, doesn't matter what toss you do. If it's the par toss, if it's a drop shot, if it's the reverse haymaker, if it's the whatever it is, right? If it feels good in your hand and they spin the same number of times in the air and they land in the same spot and they kind of act the same way, like you're not getting forward action, side action. If it's always forward action, you're doing something. Whether it results in good numbers for you is immaterial. You're doing something. You're being consistent. That was the DI thing, right? And DIs, again, care about the results. Non-DIs, now that's one window you look through, right? And level 1 of that is I'm looking at combinations. Level 2 of that is I'm looking at how the combinations emerge, right? Am I getting combinations is where most of us probably live, right? The level up is, okay, I'm getting combinations. Why? What are my dice doing to create that? And how can I change what I'm doing? That was Howard's DI piece. The confusing part was the non-DI part, which is my wife, my mother, my sister-in-law, right? People who I'm teaching craps, who I'm not teaching how to throw, just teaching them how the game works. They don't care at the early stage, or maybe at any stage, that there's 4 ways to roll a 5. They don't care about that. They don't care that it's 4 ways to roll a 5 and 6 ways to roll a 7. All that shit is confusing to people, right? Howard's point was the average bear, the guy walking up to the table who doesn't really know what he's doing, all they know, 4-1 and a 2-3. That's how 5s happen, right? There's two different ways I can see a 5 come out, right? They don't know that it's 5-2 or 4-1, 1-4. They don't care about that. They don't care about They're looking at the 5. And the dealer doesn't call 145 or 415. They say it's a 5. They don't care about, the dealers don't call up the numbers either. They just say what the result is, right? The average person, all they need to know is that there's three ways to see a 7. You can see a 7 3 ways, a 1 and a 6. You can see it with a 2 and a 5 and a 3 and a 4. That's all that the regular person cares about. That's all they have to know, right? There's more ways to do that than there is to do a 5, right? There's more ways to do that than there is to do a 6 or a 4 or whatever, right? That's what Howard's point was. When you're teaching somebody new, especially teaching them how to bet, all they need to know, there's more ways to get a 7 than there is to get a 5. And they also need to know that if somebody, the average person, the average bettor, my wife, when I'm throwing, I'm quote unquote a DI. I'm trying to make shit happen. I care about the bottom die and the top die. I care about all that stuff. And I might be making betting decisions based on what I see. If I see a bunch of 1s, I may start betting low side, right? I'm worrying about that stuff. She is seeing 5, 5, 4, 6, 6, 4, 5, right? She's seeing numbers. We teach her to bet the numbers that she's seeing, right? The DI is betting those numbers for a different reason because he's seeing the combinations working in his favor. That was the conversation that Howard had with Gargoyle, and that Gargoyle really didn't get, I think, a long enough chance to get out, right? Because it was confusing the group, and it was like he had to backtrack a little bit. That was what he was trying to say. That's what Howard said. Again, it's genius, right? You don't have to overwhelm people with all of it, right? My show does that. I've been doing that for 4 years now, right? I go a little deeper than most people do. I don't really cater to that beginner crowd, but the beginner crowd shouldn't care about all 36 combos. They should care about, God, there's 2 ways to make a 5 or a 9, and there's 3 ways to make a 7, right? 3, ultimate ways to make it. That's what they're looking at. Like, God, there's a lot more. Later, you can say, oh, look, and by the way, if you think about how the dice really work, you can start seeing how it gets more complicated. But in their world, I'm seeing 5, 5, 4, 5, 6, 4, 5. Okay, 5s are coming. Cool, I'm betting the 5, right? That's what the newbie has to see. Not that it's a 1, 4, 1, 4, 1, 4, 1, 4. Because I care about that. You all care about that. My wife doesn't give a shit that it's always a 1, 4. There's a difference in cognitive leveling that people who are playing see. That was the point that Howard was trying to make to Gargoyle, and Gargoyle tried to pass it on the other night, and it was misunderstood. I think between that concept of beginner who cares about DI, the DI who's getting started and worrying about the combinations, and the DI who's trying to cause combinations by changing how they toss, that sort of plane of existence that you live on is interesting, right? And the more up that chain you go with how dice combinations work, you start getting into different betting patterns because of it. It's interesting. All that stuff to me is fascinating. Whether there's truth to the DI piece or not, it's interesting. And I think that Howard had a way of breaking it down. I'm really glad that Gargoyle wanted to spend the time to celebrate Howard's life, the kind of man he was, how he really cared about people and his students, and just wasn't in it for the money. Howard was never in this for the money. He just liked people and helping people get better at stuff. That was all he was at. Dominator was about the grift to me. Dominator sold a dream and a grift. Howard never did that. Howard just cared about people and wanted to make people better. And that's it. And he would say, once they leave your hand, man, it's in God's hands, right? He was like, let's make it easier for God to give you a good result. That was what Howard was basically saying, and I think that's pretty cool. So there's what I wanted to say about those 2 shows, and I think hopefully that was good stuff. I mean, hopefully that you would watch them both and enjoy them. And I'll, if you like this, let me know, by the way. If you like this format, let me know. I'll do more. There's more, and trust me, all the casino tier stuff we can do, I can review all those podcasts as well the same way. So there's always good things to talk about, and I think there's nuggets we can pull out of these shows that we watch that I think we can all learn from. So, all right, let's move ahead here and go to Q&A a little bit. There's one question I can see here. Duracell wants me to know if I'm going to go over the crapsy cheat. Now, yes and no. What I'd like to do is highlight the fact that it's possible. Number one, okay. to demonstrate how it works, I don't want to do that. I don't want people to do it. I don't want them to replicate what we saw happening. But Duracell wrote me a text message last week, earlier in the week, and he's like, hey, have you heard about Nemo cheating in LFC? I'm like, no, because I've been gone. I haven't heard any of it. But apparently he's been doing this for a while, and I'm sure he's not the only one, okay? But here's the cheat. There's a way in Crapsy, this is a big bug in the system, even when the host locks you out. So as a host, right, when we go to Crapsy, there's a button that we have. This is ready to roll, right? So we're going live on YouTube. I press the ready to roll button. That's when the timer starts. And it goes, 10 seconds, and it beep, 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 goes to 0. You're locked out. You can no longer bet. Okay? There is a way to bet after that happens. There's a way that you can manipulate Crapsy. Again, I'm not going to tell you how to do it, to make a bet, right? So if you're watching live, in other words, there's a delay here. I think there's a 20-second delay on this show, is what I had the latency set to, where if you're watching over Zoom, so let's say that I have a guest on. The guest and I are in real time on Zoom. You all see that 20 seconds later. If I'm shooting the dice, right, and I get a 6-4-10 or something like that, right, and you know it before the world knows it, because YouTube sees it 20 seconds later. While that delay is happening, you can, if you know the result, quickly do a thing in Crapsy that lets you hop the number for $1 million or whatever you want to do and make all your money back. You can avoid disaster all the time and have, so the guys that had the $500,000 wins, in large part, you can see them going red, green in Crapsy while they're cheating the system, right? I've said this a million times, okay? And let's have a real conversation about Crapsy. And as you know, now I can let the cat out of the bag. I'm building a new app, right? That's going to basically do the same thing. Let us play live together, all the games, right? The integrity of the game is important to me. If you're using Crapsy or the app that I'm going to build, and your sole purpose is to beat everybody else and be top of the leaderboard, you're doing the wrong thing. Unless you're on Brian's show, it's not a tournament. You're trying to practice the way you play with the person throwing. The whole idea is I finally have real rolls. Like, I'm not playing against a random number generator. I'm playing against Jeff. Jeff's got rolls. I can bet against, those rolls, real rolls, not RNG stuff. That's the magic of that app. It lets you do that. The worst part of that app is that people see that as a chance to do stupid shit they'd never do in real life, and now cheating, right? Don't be a cheater, right? And people have been called out for it. And to me, it's kind of ludicrous that that's a thing. Who cares if you're on top of the fucking leaderboard? Just play. Just go out there and say, today, does the skill 66, the way I play it, work? Today, does duck and cover work? You just want to see, that's all you're looking for, right? If your duck and cover gets burned because of a PSO, and you wait it out and you see that the guy rolled a 7 and you put, $1,000 on the hop 7 so you can play again, what the fuck are you doing? That's crazy to me. So anyway, don't do it. Use the tool as the tool that it's for. Nobody cares that you have all the money, right? And if everybody else started with $1,000 and we've all got 2, 3, 4,000, and you've got 300,000, okay, good for you. Nobody cares. Nobody cares but your ego. And that's that. So yes, Duracell, I will address it, and there it is. Any other questions that came up? I do see 80% are off axis. Do you agree with that number? Bone Tracker tells a different story, right? And I don't know the number top of my head. I think we have to look at the number. I don't know how, when I did my Bone Tracker stuff, it gives you a different number than 80%, but I know what he's talking about. And again, your dice are never, and he's saying off axis in the air, not off axis as a result. And that's the difference, right? Remember, we talked DI, there's on axis flight and there's an on axis result in the end. Two different things to talk about. Make sure that we're talking about the right thing. 80% of the tosses are off axis. Reason why Gargoyle prefers an off axis toss is he knows that most of the time his dice are flying not perfectly. That's the reason why he does that. Capiche? All right. I think that's all I got. Somebody just gave me a big old thumbs down, so I must have pissed you off, and that's okay. With 95% are all back. Yeah, right. That's the thing. It's so now, to me, the chopper toss that I throw or the helicopter toss, 100% are on axis. My dice fly perfectly on that axis the entire flight. I'm 100% on axis. My results are not. Right, my results are not on axis results, but the flight is always perfect. So, all right, I think that's all I got, guys. I see no more questions. Hopefully you got something out of the talk today. Yeah, have a great weekend. I'll be back on Monday. New slate of shows next week. And I think that's it. I think that's all I got for you. Love y'all. God bless everybody. And I'll leave you, of course, with the last little bit of inspiration here, which is this. Remember, failure is an event, not a person. Bad things happen to good people. It doesn't make good people bad when they do something wrong or something wrong happens. Things go south. It doesn't mean you're a piece of crap, right? If you PSO, it doesn't mean that you're a bad person, right? If you lose your money, it's a bad day, you're not a bad person. Remember that. And not just in craps, not just in gambling, but in your life too, right? You can fail. You can have a bad event or something happen to you. Doesn't reflect on you unless you were purposeful in that act. So, all right, I'll have new inspiration for you next week. In the meantime, God bless everybody. I'll see you on Monday. Have a good weekend. Bye.